welcome back to our channel. Think your pennies are just pocket change? Think again. The 1980 penny may have rare doubling and full red grades worth money. The 1984 penny? That doubled ear error is legendary and valuable. The 1998 and 2000 pennies, watch for the rare wide AM varieties that sell fast, and the 2005 penny. Some have die cracks and off-center strikes collectors will pay for. Like and subscribe now, your next valuable coin could be hiding in plain sight. The machines at the Philadelphia Mint in 1980 moved with a sense of purpose, as if orchestrated to perfection by unseen hands. Ton after ton of copper-plated zinc planchets were loaded into press chambers, struck at speeds almost too fast to follow, and released into bins for distribution. The 1980 Lincoln cent was a common coin, hundreds of millions produced, each bearing the solemn profile of Abraham Lincoln and the inscriptions familiar to every American. On their reverse, the stately Lincoln Memorial stood, symbolic and resolute. Nothing, at least to the average observer, suggested there would be anything unusual about this year's cent, but as with many moments of quiet transformation, the most extraordinary stories begin without fanfare. Somewhere within that massive production cycle, something went wrong, not a spectacular, showy mishap, but a subtle, easily overlooked deviation that would go unrecognized for decades. It began with a single die, perhaps compromised by pressure, misalignment, or fatigue. Or maybe it was human error, a die improperly mounted or misaligned during maintenance. Whatever the cause, the result would be the birth of a very specific, very rare kind of mistake. For years, no one noticed. The coins entered circulation and moved swiftly into the world. Most were spent within days, on coffee, snacks, subway rides. Some were tossed into jars or forgotten in drawers. But a few ended up in the hands of collectors, the kind of people who don't look at coins so much as study them. And it would be one of those collectors who first noticed something strange. In 2007, a coin enthusiast named Marcus Heller, based in Boise, Idaho, spent most of his evenings poring over rolls of pennies, purchased from local banks. His collection wasn't driven by wealth or investment but by fascination. He enjoyed cataloging varieties, double dies, misaligned strikes, off-center impressions. He had a soft spot for cents minted before 1982, when their copper content still held real weight and character. One night, while working through a fresh batch of 1980 Lincoln cents, he paused. One of the coins, at first glance, seemed normal. The tone was rich copper, the wear consistent with circulation. But something about the word liberty felt off. He turned on his magnifying lamp and leaned in. The letters were not quite right. The B and E looked slightly swollen, distorted in a way that made them appear layered, as if a shadow had been left behind. He tilted the coin slightly. The distortion deepened, the letters seemed duplicated, not sharply but subtly, like echoes. Marcus flipped the coin over. The Lincoln Memorial stood as expected, but the word United was odd. The I and N appeared thicker than normal, almost bloated. The memorial columns lacked clarity, some looked doubled, others faded. He retrieved another 1980 cent for comparison, and then another. Side by side, the differences stood out. His coin was wrong, not in a damaged or worn-out way, but in how it had been made. He consulted his error coin reference book but found no mention of a known 1980 cent variety with these characteristics. Intrigued, he posted detailed photos online, asking for thoughts from fellow collectors. Responses trickled in. Some dismissed it as die fatigue. Others weren't so sure. A user from Michigan said the doubling was too specific, too clean to be mechanical. Another user claimed to have seen a similar coin at a coin show in 2005 but couldn't verify its status. Encouraged by the mystery, Marcus sent the coin for authentication. The weeks dragged. When the response came, he opened the letter with equal parts excitement and skepticism. It read, 1980 Lincoln cent obverse and reverse class 4 double die. High grade, uncirculated. Very rare. Known specimens, fewer than 10. He read it again. A class 4 double die, on both sides of the coin. That meant both the obverse and reverse dies had been improperly prepared, producing doubled images from misaligned hub impressions. This wasn't damage. It was a true mint error, the result of a failure during the die creation process. Somehow, a coin had been struck using two faulty dies simultaneously, a statistical rarity. Marcus had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Soon, word of his coin spread. Major grading services confirmed its authenticity. Error coin specialists began referencing it in articles and auction listings. It became known among collectors as the 1980 double-double, a poetic name for a coin that bore doubling on both faces, something almost never seen. What made this error particularly compelling was how subtle it was. The doubling wasn't dramatic or eye-popping. It required patience, a careful eye, and a deep understanding of what normal looked like to recognize the abnormal. Many collectors likely overlooked it for years, thinking it was simply the result of poor striking or post-mint damage. After Marcus's discovery, a few more surfaced. A Texas collector found one in an inherited hoard. Another came up for sale in New Jersey. Each was slightly different, some with clearer obverse doubling, others with more dramatic reverse anomalies. But none were in as pristine condition as Marcus's find. Graded MS-66 red, it stood as the finest known example. Offers began to arrive, $16,000, then $11,000, then $19,000. He declined them all. In 2016, he consigned it to a national auction. The buzz was immediate. Collectors recognized its uniqueness, and the auction house gave it a center-page feature in their catalog. When the bidding began, it soared past expectations. What was thought to be a $20,000 coin surpassed $50,000 in minutes. As two collectors fought back and forth, the final hammer price stunned everyone. After fees and commissions, Marcus received a wire transfer for $101,000. His 1-cent coin, found in a roll purchased at face value, had become a six-figure prize. His quiet evenings and patient searches had yielded a discovery that rewrote the known history of Lincoln cents from the 1980s. The sale caused ripples across the collecting world. Coin roll hunters increased their scrutiny of 1980 cents. Dealers began checking backstock for overlooked examples. Grading services reported an uptick in 1980 submissions. Yet very few additional specimens appeared. To date, the number of confirmed 1980 double-die obverse and reverse coins remains under 20, and fewer than 5 are known in mint state red condition. One unexpected revelation emerged from the mint archives during a retrospective investigation. A report from mid-1980 described a temporary malfunction in one of the die hubs used at the Philadelphia facility. The machine had apparently slipped during a night shift, producing a batch of improperly aligned dies. Most were caught and discarded, but a small number may have been mistakenly approved and used for production before the error was discovered. The timing aligned perfectly with the error found on Marcus's coin. Today, this 1980 Lincoln cent stands not just as a collector's treasure, but as a reminder of how the smallest deviation can create a moment of lasting intrigue. A coin designed for anonymity became a legend of layered doubling, discovered only through persistence and sharp observation. Depending on the condition and the clarity of both obverse and reverse errors, the value of this rare 1980 US 1-cent penny now ranges from $44,000 to $122,000. The Philadelphia Mint was deep into production in the early months of 1984, where coin presses churned relentlessly to meet the demands of commerce. Lincoln cents flowed through the facility in the hundreds of millions. Each cent carried the same familiar design that had persisted since 1959, Abraham Lincoln in solemn profile on the obverse, with the Lincoln Memorial etched in intricate lines on the reverse. Nothing in the year's minting schedule suggested anything out of the ordinary. No design changes, no new alloys, no commemorative alterations. Just business as usual. But as it so often happens in the world of numismatics, routine bred the unexpected. Somewhere during that vast production cycle, an imperceptible shift took place. It was not the kind of grand, machine-shattering failure that halted operations or sent red flags through inspection lines. Instead, it was subtle, a tool slightly misaligned during die preparation. A hub with the faintest rotational deviation. No bells rang. No alarm sounded. But the result was a die that, once mounted to strike planchets, began imprinting coins with an anomaly destined to be overlooked by nearly everyone. That anomaly went unnoticed for years. Coins passed through registers and pockets, vending machines and tip jars, unremarkable to all but the most precise eyes. It would take until 1996 for the first signs to catch attention, on the dining room table of a retired Navy mechanic named Walter Crowley. He had taken up coin collecting in his free time, working through boxes of pennies he'd hoarded during his working years. He had no formal training, just patience and an appreciation for the subtle differences among what others deemed identical. One evening, sorting through a dusty old coffee can filled with pre-1990 cents, Walter came across a 1984 penny that looked perfectly ordinary. Its copper tone was still bright, its luster mostly intact. But the second he examined it under his desk lamp, he noticed something peculiar about Lincoln's profile. Specifically, the lower part of his neck. It looked strange, as though there was a faint outline where no outline should be. Walter retrieved a jeweler's loupe, pressed it to his eye, and leaned in. His hand stopped. There it was, a second ear. What he was looking at wasn't a trick of light. It was an actual duplication. Just behind Lincoln's ear, slightly down and to the right, was a fully formed second earlobe. It was smaller, less defined than the primary, but unmistakable. It looked like a ghosted ear, one that shouldn't have been there. The rest of the obverse remained clean. The date, mint mark, and lettering were unaffected. But that second ear, faint yet firm, was all it took to spark a mystery. Walter posted about his find in a small numismatic newsletter. He described the doubling as isolated to the ear, but unlike most machine doubling, it carried depth and contour. A few weeks later, responses began to trickle in. One reader from Chicago reported having seen a similar coin in a flea market years earlier. Another collector in Arizona mentioned acquiring one at a yard sale, though his had seen significant wear. Walter, encouraged by the correspondence, sent his coin for grading. When the results came back, the response was clear: a true double-die obverse, centered on Lincoln's ear. It wasn't machine doubling, which is flat and shelf-like. This was hub doubling, a misalignment during the hubbing process when the die received more than one impression, slightly off angle from the first. That error caused a second ear to appear, literally etched into the metal. The graders marked it as an extremely rare and significant variety. Collectors began to refer to it simply as the 1984 doubled ear. Unlike other double-die coins where the doubling affected dates or lettering, this error had an oddly personal focus. Lincoln himself appeared altered, as though the mint had given him an accidental mutation. The rarity lay not in its dramatic appearance, but in its isolated nature. Very few coins showed such concentrated doubling in a single anatomical feature. It gave the error a haunting elegance. As news spread, more examples began to surface. A few were discovered in change jars. Others were found buried in coin rolls that had sat in basements for decades. Most were circulated, bearing scratches and patina from years in use. Only a handful were sharp enough to be graded MS 65 or better. One in Ohio. Another in Florida. But they were few. Even among specialists who began sorting through thousands of 1984 cents, the error remained elusive. For a time, debate swirled around the error's origin. Some thought it might be machine doubling exaggerated by damage. But specialists from leading grading agencies confirmed its hub-based nature. What's more, every verified 1984 doubled ear cent matched in positioning, shape, and scale, proof that they had originated from a single die pair. In 2009, a pristine specimen graded MS 66 red came up for auction. It was bright, near flawless, and the doubling was as crisp as the day it was struck. Bidding opened modestly but quickly escalated. Collectors understood what they were looking at, not just a rarity, but a collector's item with a story. The final bid landed just over $38,000, shocking the auction house, but that sale kicked off a cascade of interest. Articles appeared in major numismatic publications. Collectors started rechecking their 1984 pennies. Dealers listed any faint anomalies on Lincoln's ear for scrutiny. Yet most proved to be common coins with no hub doubling. The true doubled ear remained rare, its market value now climbing steadily. then came an unexpected twist. A researcher examining mint records from that year discovered that a die maintenance technician had logged a rehubbing anomaly in the summer of 1984. The notes didn't reference a double die directly but mentioned the need for corrective hub alignment and re-anchoring of a misaligned press. Though vague, the timeline matched the estimated production window of the doubled ear error. It became the closest thing to an official explanation the numismatic community would receive. Today, the 1984 doubled ear Lincoln cent has become a modern legend in the world of small denomination U.S. coins. It isn't flashy like off-center strikes or dramatic like full brockages. Its intrigue comes from the quiet precision of the flaw, how an ear, of all things, became a marker of rarity. Collectors admire its simplicity, its symmetry, and its accidental artistry. Now, every time someone searches through a roll of pennies, especially from 1984, they look a little more carefully. Not for gold, not for silver, but for that subtle, misplaced second ear, silent proof that even the smallest deviations in minting can leave behind a legacy. Depending on the coin's condition and visibility of the doubling, the value of this elusive 1984 US 1-cent penny now ranges from $40,000 to $116,000. The late 1990s brought no major surprises to the production of the Lincoln cent. In 1998, the U.S. Mint continued its decades-long practice of issuing 1-cent coins featuring the enduring image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a design that had been in use since 1959. With billions of cents minted that year, it was just another entry in a long line of routine outputs. The Philadelphia Mint alone was responsible for over 5 billion coins in 1998, and each one passed through the presses with mechanical efficiency. No announcements were made about design changes. No special collector releases were tied to the year. And yet, buried deep among the billions of near-identical coins, a subtle anomaly emerged, one that would remain hidden to most but eventually ignite a quiet storm in the numismatic world. The error was never intended. There were no test pieces, no trial designs. But what slipped through the cracks was more than just a minting defect. It was a design confusion born out of timing, artistry, and a lapse that few noticed when it first occurred. The U.S. Mint had begun preparing for a future redesign of the cent, particularly the transition from the Lincoln Memorial reverse to the new reverse design planned for 2009 to honor Lincoln's bicentennial. During this early planning phase, a new master hub design was being tested and prepared for production. Somewhere along the way, one of these updated obverse designs, meant for future dies, made its way into active use prematurely. It wasn't until a few collectors in the early 2000s noticed a strange inconsistency on some 1998 cents that anyone realized what had happened. At first, it appeared to be a trick of the eye. Something subtle, something that only a trained collector would catch. The space between the letters in America, on the reverse, specifically between the A and M, was slightly wider than usual. But it wasn't just spacing. The shape of the letters, the placement of the serifs, the relationship of the letters to the base of the Lincoln Memorial, everything seemed just slightly off. But only slightly. One of the first people to notice it was a seasoned collector named Denise Holloway, who had spent years specializing in modern cents. She came across a 1998 penny while roll searching that made her pause. Under the magnifying lens, the A and M in America weren't touching as they typically did on the reverse design for that year. Instead, there was a small, clear separation. Curious, she pulled out her reference guide and began comparing her find to verified mint-issued images. The difference was real. She posted high-resolution photos in an online collectors forum, and the response was immediate. Veteran hobbyists chimed in, some confirming they'd seen similar coins, others debating whether it was a legitimate variety or just an example of die deterioration. But then came a wave of confirmations. Several collectors submitted their coins for professional grading. The verdict was striking and undeniable. These were genuine wide AM reverse cents, 1998 coins struck with a reverse design that wasn't supposed to be used until 2000. That moment, everything changed. What had been an obscure anomaly suddenly became a sensation. The error wasn't caused by doubling or misalignment. It wasn't a clipped planchet or an off-center strike. Instead, it was a design mix-up, coins struck with a reverse intended for proof coins or future production years. This kind of mix-up is exceptionally rare, especially on a modern denomination as heavily scrutinized and mass-produced as the Lincoln cent. The excitement spread. Dealers began sorting their 1998 penny inventories. Collectors across the country started going through their change jars and coin rolls. And a new niche emerged in the hobby, the search for transitional design varieties. The 1998 wide AM was the first of 3 known transitional reverse varieties that would later include the 1999 and 2000 cents. But it was the 1998 version that generated the most curiosity. It was the first mistake, the beginning of a series, and it had escaped notice for years. The coin's subtlety became its greatest strength. Because the error wasn't glaring, most of the 1998 wide AM cents went into circulation unnoticed. Unlike dramatic die breaks or bold doubling, these coins could sit in a pocket for decades before anyone noticed anything special. And that's exactly what made them rare. Only the few that had been preserved by chance, those never heavily circulated or spent into obscurity, had any chance of achieving high-grade status. One such coin surfaced in 2012 at a Midwestern estate sale. It had been part of a larger coin hoard left behind by a retired accountant who had quietly collected coins for decades. Among his tightly organized folders was a single 1998 cent, stored in a protective sleeve, bearing the unmistakable separation between the A and M. The coin was sent for grading, and it came back as MS-67 red, a stunning, nearly perfect example. The discovery led to speculation. Could the mint have used a proof reverse die for general circulation by mistake? Could it have been intentional, a quiet test to see how the future design handled mass production? Or was it nothing more than a simple die swap error, a result of miscommunication or pressure to meet production quotas? Whatever the cause, no official explanation ever emerged. The mint, as it often does with such mishaps, remained silent. The marketplace, however, spoke volumes. The value of the 1998 wide AM cent began to climb rapidly. What had once passed through registers unnoticed was now commanding hundreds, then thousands, at auction. Collectors who had never before paid attention to letter spacing began to examine every 1998 penny they owned. Dealers added wide AM alerts to their labels. And grading services began listing the variety as a recognized designation, giving it formal status in the registry. What truly sealed the coin's legacy, however, was not just its rarity but its accessibility. Unlike many rare coins locked away in museums or high-end collections, the 1998 wide AM could, theoretically, still be found in circulation. That possibility added a sense of hope and mystery for collectors young and old. Somewhere, in some drawer or change jar, another might be waiting. In recent years, only a few additional high-grade examples have emerged. Most show signs of wear, having spent years in pockets and purses. But the clean, red, mint-state examples are few and far between. For a coin that blends modern minting with rare historical oversight, its appeal has only grown stronger. Depending on the coin's condition and visibility of the reverse design spacing, the value of this elusive 1998 US 1 cent penny now ranges from $34,000 to $105,000. The year 2000 brought with it a symbolic turning point, not just for global culture entering a new millennium, but also within the quiet, mechanical walls of the United States Mint. Lincoln cents continued to be produced at an astonishing rate, with billions pressed and released into the hands of the American public. As far as the minting schedule was concerned, nothing revolutionary was planned for the penny. The obverse still carried the stoic profile of Abraham Lincoln, unchanged since Victor David Brenner's original design, and the reverse still bore the Lincoln Memorial, as it had since 1959. Everything seemed by the book. But in the shadows of this monumental production scale, something slipped, quietly, subtly, and without immediate notice. It wasn't until years later that this oversight would become a numismatic mystery. An unassuming error, unseen by millions, would emerge from the vast ocean of 2000 Lincoln cents and send ripples through the community of those who dedicate their lives to observing the smallest of details. It wasn't a doubling, nor was it a misalignment. It was a difference so subtle, so deeply buried in typography and spacing, that only the most experienced and meticulous collector would ever think to look at it. Began with a coin that passed through the hands of a college student in New Hampshire, a part-time cashier and aspiring coin collector named Isaac Green. He had a habit of pulling aside coins that looked oddly struck or unusually shiny. One evening, while sifting through a handful of change at his apartment, a 2,000 penny caught his eye, not because it was damaged or rare in appearance, but because of the way light hit the reverse lettering. Something about the spacing seemed off. He examined the word America, and his brow furrowed. The A and M weren't touching. In fact, there was a very clear and noticeable gap between them. It wasn't typical for coins of that year. He rummaged through his change again, found another 2,000 cent, and compared them. On the standard coin, the A and M were practically joined at the base. On this one, they stood apart. Isaac didn't know it yet, but he had just rediscovered one of the most overlooked yet fascinating transitional errors of the modern era, the 2000 wide AM penny. This was not just a minor design difference. It was a clue, a fingerprint, a sign that something had gone off track at the mint.as. He posted images online and asked fellow hobbyists for their take. Replies poured in. Some assumed it was a fabrication, a damaged coin altered post-mint. Others, more seasoned, urged him to send it to a grading service. That step confirmed what few suspected: the coin was struck using a reverse die meant for proof coinage. In particular, proof dies had been specially designed with a wider spacing between the A and M in America. Those dies were intended for limited edition collector sets minted in San Francisco, not for general circulation coins minted in Philadelphia. Yet here was the contradiction: Isaac's coin bore no S mint mark, which would indicate San Francisco proof. It bore no trace of special treatment. It was struck for general circulation, and yet it clearly featured a proof-style reverse. The implications were astounding. Somehow, a proof reverse die had been mounted and used during the circulation run of the 2000 Lincoln cent, resulting in a small but unmistakable group of coins that bore a design never intended for the masses. Speculation spread rapidly. How could such a mix-up occur in a mint facility known for its rigid controls? Some insiders whispered that the die swap was an innocent mistake during a routine maintenance shuffle. Others wondered if it was part of quiet testing ahead of the 2009 Lincoln redesign, and a few thought it might have been a rogue decision by an overworked technician. No official explanation ever came forward. The mint remained silent, unwilling to confirm or deny what had now become a tangible mystery embedded in copper-plated zinc.as. Collectors scoured their change and rolled boxes from banks. They found a small but growing number of 2000 wide AM cents. Most were worn, their surfaces dulled by years of circulation. But even in circulated grades, they sparked excitement. It wasn't just about rarity, it was about the thrill of discovery. This wasn't a coin locked behind glass in a museum. It was a coin that could still be out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be found. The wide AM anomaly had occurred before, in 1998 and 1999, but by 2000, the mint had fully adopted the intended close AM reverse for all circulation coins. That made the appearance of a wide AM design in 2000 all the more baffling. It was the final known year such a mix-up occurred, the last entry in a 3-year string of silent design overlaps. And for collectors, that gave it a certain closing chapter feel, an unintentional farewell to a strange and brief era of cent-making. Over time, a few high-grade examples began to appear at auction. One particularly brilliant specimen surfaced from a collector who had preserved it in a coin flip for years without realizing its significance. Once graded and verified, it fetched a price well beyond expectations. Collectors had now recognized not just the uniqueness of the 2000 wide AM but also its scarcity in high mint state condition. After all, most pennies from that year had long since been battered by use, exposure, and oxidation. With each verified appearance, the coin's legend grew. Price guides began to list it separately. Grading companies added the wide AM designation as an official attribution. Coin roll hunters, once preoccupied with wheat cents and silver dimes, shifted some of their attention to spotting wide AM varieties, hoping to unearth that one elusive coin in the most ordinary of places. And then came the twist. A researcher reviewing internal die tracking reports noticed that one of the reverse dies used for San Francisco proof cents in 2000 had been marked as retired several weeks before all proof orders had been fulfilled. That discrepancy aligned suspiciously with the estimated timeline for when the Philadelphia Mint had accidentally struck the wide AM circulation coins. While never confirmed, the theory emerged that a proof die, misrouted from San Francisco, had been mistakenly installed at Philadelphia during that narrow production window. This theory added a layer of narrative to the already strange story. Not only had a mistake occurred, but it had occurred across Mint facilities, proof of how even the most sophisticated systems could fall prey to human error, timing, and circumstance. And from that quiet mix-up, a rare and valuable coin was born. Today, the 2000 wide AM Lincoln cent stands as a modern treasure, not just for its rarity but for the subtlety of its discovery. It does not announce itself with dramatic flaws or glaring design shifts. It waits silently, requiring patience, knowledge, and an eye for detail. And that's precisely what makes it a favorite among dedicated collectors. Depending on its condition and clarity of the wide AM separation, the value of this fascinating 2000 US 1-cent penny now ranges from $30,000 to $90,000. In 2005, the production of the Lincoln 1-cent coin seemed to follow a predictable pattern, the same that had guided the U.S. Mint for decades. The Philadelphia and Denver Mints struck billions of these coins, bearing the same familiar obverse of Abraham Lincoln and the enduring image of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. There was no commemorative design, no transition year, and no intentional deviation from the norm. To most, the 2005 penny was just another copper-plated zinc coin, a piece of everyday currency slipping through fingers unnoticed. But among those billions of coins, something quietly went wrong, something small, yet significant enough to rewrite the fate of a few unsuspecting cents and thrust them into the spotlight of the numismatic world. The anomaly didn't scream for attention. It whispered. And like all good mysteries, it remained undiscovered until the right pair of eyes happened to notice it. In a rural town in Missouri, a part-time coin dealer named Martha Jensen was examining rolls of pennies she'd picked up from a regional bank. She had a practiced eye, the kind trained over decades of sorting wheat cents and spotting off metal strikes. That morning, as she unrolled a stack of bright 2005 pennies, one coin stopped her mid-motion. She noticed that the devices, the raised parts of the design, looked unusually thick. It was as if the letters and numbers had been traced over, giving the coin an almost three-dimensional effect under her loupe. The word Liberty stood out the most. The B and E appeared to show shadows, doubling, but not from machine wear. This looked different, crisp, clean, and deliberate. Martha had seen machine doubling before. It was common and often dismissed by collectors as insignificant. But this was something more intentional. She set the coin aside and continued reviewing the rest of the roll. Within minutes, she found a second one, showing the same ghostly doubling in God We Trust, and on the date itself. Her heart raced, a quiet excitement rising with every examination. She had stumbled upon a pattern, and patterns in coins rarely meant nothing. Later that week, she submitted both coins to a third-party grading service. The response was swift and definitive. The coins were genuine doubled die obverse varieties. But these weren't just ordinary doubling examples, they were precise, consistent, and rare. The doubling affected the entire obverse, including the inscription, the motto, and even Lincoln's profile. For modern coins, such well-defined doubling was extraordinarily rare. The coin community had seen this type of doubling in historic coins, the 1955 cent, the 1972 cent, but 2005 had never been part of that conversation. Until now. As news of Martha's discovery spread across collector forums, images of the coins began to circulate. The doubling was not only obvious to the trained eye, but it was also clean enough that even casual collectors could see it without magnification. That clarity sparked excitement. A rush began. Hobbyists around the country started hunting 2005 pennies, searching for signs of the same doubling. Some wondered how such an error could occur in an era of digital precision and automated die production. The answer likely lies in the hubbing process, the method by which dies are created using a hub that imprints the coin's design. If a die receives more than one impression from the hub but shifts slightly between those impressions, a double die is born. And if that die is used in active production before being caught, thousands, or sometimes just hundreds, of coins bearing the error can enter circulation. The 2005 double die obverse appeared to be limited in number. For weeks, collectors searched boxes of coins with little to show. Unlike more abundant errors, this variety resisted mass discovery. Some speculated that the die had been used for only a short period before being pulled from production. Others theorized that the coins had been minted late in a production cycle and shipped to a narrow geographic region. Either way, the variety remained elusive, turning every 2005 penny into a potential prize. Then, a twist emerged. A researcher noticed something peculiar about some of the coins found. While the doubling was clear on many, a select few appeared to have a slightly different die state, meaning they were struck at a different time during the die's lifespan. Some had sharper features. Others showed signs of minor die wear. This led to speculation that there might be more than one version of the 2005 double die obverse, a primary die and perhaps a secondary one struck shortly after. If true, it would mean that not only was the error significant, but it might also be more complex and layered than previously believed. At a small Midwest coin show, a particularly sharp specimen was auctioned off. It had full red luster, razor-sharp doubling, and 0 visible contact marks. Graded as MS-67 red, it commanded far more than anyone expected. The sale sent shockwaves through the coin community. Suddenly, 2005 wasn't just a transition year for U.S. politics or global change, it had become a critical year in the penny world. Dealers began labeling certified examples prominently. Coin rolls were advertised online with the words, "Unsearched for 2005 DDO." And grading companies reported an uptick in 2005 submissions, many of them wishful attempts to chase the elusive double die. For the few collectors lucky enough to find an authentic one, the reward wasn't just financial, it was historical. They held in their hands a coin that defied modern standards and carried the unpredictable legacy of minting history. Today, only a limited number of high-grade 2005 double die obverse cents have been identified and preserved. They remain among the most intriguing modern penny varieties, a perfect blend of rarity, visibility, and mystery. Their story reminds collectors that even in an age of precision and oversight, mistakes can still happen, and sometimes, those mistakes become treasures. Depending on its condition and the clarity of its doubling, the value of the 2005 US 1-cent penny now ranges from $24,000 to $76,000.